5 minutes after 1 p.m. Monday, November 7th. Tomorrow is the final day of the election, and hopefully on Wednesday we will know who our next president will be. Now, in the middle of all of this, we had what has become what I'd term to be probably the worst move by an FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover stopped being the man in the dress at the FBI. So this has turned very ugly, and then the director Comey this weekend announced, well, nothing new to see here after our big explosive letter, pretend like all of that never happened. So joining me on the phone, he was with me last week as well. You might remember him, Marc Miller. He's former federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice in the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section. Mr. Miller, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
No, look, I'm glad to have you back because I thought about you when this story broke. And seriously, the FBI did, as we talked about, they used computer software to quickly sort through and do pattern matching. And obviously they found, well, we already know about these emails, nothing new here. But just tell me, with your background, Mr. Miller, what does this do to the prestige or the view of independence of the FBI? How does this affect the FBI in your view?
Well, it's certainly an unfortunate incident because I think we all agree we really want a fair and impartial Justice Department. And it is kind of proof positive of why you have these long-standing policies in place that you don't comment on pending investigations, and you'd only ever comment on something that's a matter of public record, like an indictment or a complaint. So I think it reiterates why that rule is important. And I think we saw from, what happened over the last week to 10 days that it really shakes people's confidence in the justice system, which is, not a good thing in my view.
Right. And in particular, so we have the judicial branch of government, but what is hard to keep straight, I think, for many people is the FBI is an executive branch agency. So that's what makes this a little bit different. The FBI, the DOJ, they serve essentially at the pleasure of the president, and we need a level of independence there. And that's why, the term the Hatch Act has come up through all of this, because the Hatch Act is specific to the executive branch and politicking by people other than basically the president and the vice president. Now, I don't believe that Director Comey crossed the line and committed any Hatch Act violations, but this is the spirit of why the Hatch Act exists. Do you agree with what I'm saying, or do I sound totally off base?
No, I think you're onto something in that the spirit is certainly to avoid an appearance of impropriety and an appearance of some sort of partiality. You don't even want those questions being asked. To take it back just a step, I don't think he's probably going to be in any jeopardy in regards to the Hatch Act either, for a couple of reasons. One, the underlying fact pattern wasn't something that he initiated. It came about as a separate investigation, kind of landed on his desk. Now, how he handled it is what brought up some of the concerns for people. And then secondly, in the Hatch Act, I'm pretty sure that presidential appointees, which he is, are exempt from the Hatch Act. Exactly. So it's really designed at the career prosecutor or the career law enforcement agent.
So in this case now, though, let's fast forward just a second here, Mr. Miller, which is, let's just assume, for the sake of discussion, that Hillary Clinton becomes president. Doesn't this kind of cause a problem between the director of the FBI and who becomes president of the United States?
Well, I think there's some recent history that we've had that happen between several presidents and some FBI directors. Certainly his appointment is for 10 years, like you mentioned. I think that puts him through 2023 technically. But the president could certainly fire the FBI director. It's not unheard of. So there's certainly a fair amount of tension, and it is difficult to strike a balance between having an independent and fair justice system while realizing that they're actually political appointees.
Isn't that that's a total conundrum? I mean, it's a paradox there. Let's see, I want it to be nonpartisan, but they're political appointees. But that's why it's a 10-year term, because that's beyond the 2 terms that any president can serve. So that is, part of the reason that you come up with numbers like 10 years instead of a 5-year term. You want it to be beyond the president's. But, when we look at all this and we look at like the Clinton Foundation and all these different things that are going on, Mr. Miller, tell me about, what is the FBI doing now? What happens next? I mean, so Comey says nothing here, but there are still other investigations. Or, what's going on at this point now?
I think there's going to be some very strained discussions probably between the FBI and the Justice Department about whether to move forward in a couple of those investigations that have been referenced. You get to a point in an investigation where the agents can only do so much on their own, and then they have to enlist the help of one of the prosecutors to open a grand jury investigation or to send out grand jury subpoenas to really do a full, robust investigation. So without that added cooperation, those investigations would stall. So I think there are some difficult discussions and meetings that are likely going to be occurring. And then, of course, the backdrop on all of that is certainly if Hillary Clinton wins the election tomorrow, you'll have a chief executive who could potentially be in the crosshairs. So it's a quite dicey situation for sure.
Yeah, and by the way, Senator Al Franken has announced that he will open Senate hearings on Director Comey as well. So, I mean, this is just the best thing, if, not that he would ever listen to me, but I don't see how Director Comey stays in his position at this point. I mean, this is just going to get ugly. I don't know. I mean, what happens when the sitting FBI director becomes the target of Senate hearings? Is this hasn't happened recently?
I think it certainly hasn't happened in recent memory. I believe the last FBI director to be relieved of his duties was William S. Sessions back in the first Bush administration, if memory serves. So it has been a while. It's not absolutely unheard of, but it's, as you said earlier, that's the reason you get a 10-year appointment, hopefully, for the FBI director to kind of lessen their involvement in political matters. And, I think right now, both parties are upset at him, and that doesn't bode well for survival inside the Beltway.
He did the magical thing, which was to get both sides to agree on something, which is that they don't like him. That is unbelievable in the current environment. Marc Miller, former federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice. Mr. Miller, thanks for coming back on the show. Always appreciate your insight.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, appreciate it. Take care. You as well. All right, well, coming up next, I'm still waiting to hear from somebody to call in. If you're in a married couple, one is voting for one candidate, the other is voting for another. I want to just hear about what's happening in your marriage. I mean that, not from like a marriage counselor, just, is this a happy thing? James Carville marry Madeline, or is this ending in divorce? It's just, I'm curious. 415-8080-810. You can call me in the studio on 415-808-0810. Otherwise, I'm also going to talk about, I put up my last proposition video today. It took me days to come up. Wasn't sure how I was going to come out. That's why Prop 66 took me as long as it did. That's up on KGOradio.com. That's next. I'm Ethan Behrman, KGO 810.